A quiet afternoon takes a dramatic turn when a young black teen, Malik, finds himself in an unfair confrontation with a local police officer. What should have been a routine interaction spirals into something much darker as the officer's bias begins to show. Malik tries to stay calm, but the situation quickly becomes humiliating and tense. Just when it seems like there's no way out, a car pulls up, and Malik's father steps onto the scene. With a commanding presence and a firm grasp of justice, he's not about to let his son be treated unfairly. As tensions rise and truths are revealed, this father's fight for his son's dignity and rights becomes a powerful moment that no one saw coming. Will justice prevail? Stay tuned to witness a story of courage, resilience, and standing up for what's right. Malik's father, Mr. Carter, steps out of the car, his expression calm but determined. He's no stranger to standing up for what's right, and today's no different. As he approaches, the officer's demeanor shifts slightly, but the tension in the air is still heavy. Malik stands silently, trying to keep his composure, but the humiliation of being unfairly targeted is clear in his eyes. Mr. Carter looks the officer directly in the eye and calmly asks what's going on. The officer stumbles over his words, trying to justify his actions, but Mr. Carter isn't buying it. He knows the law and he knows his son. As a small crowd begins to gather, whispers spread through the bystanders. People are starting to question the officer's behavior. Malik's father, steady and composed, demands accountability. But will the officer admit his wrongdoing, or will he escalate the situation further? The officer, now visibly uncomfortable, tries to assert his authority. He points to Malik and claims he was acting suspiciously. Mr. Carter, unshaken, calmly asks for specifics, but the officer struggles to provide any concrete evidence. Meanwhile, Malik stands quietly, his hands clenched, trying to hold back his frustration. The small crowd watching begins to murmur, their expressions a mix of concern and disbelief. Among them is an older woman who steps forward. "I saw everything," she says firmly. "This boy wasn't doing anything wrong." Her words hang in the air, adding more pressure to the situation. The officer, clearly flustered, tries to dismiss her, but Mr. Carter won't let it go. "If my son's being accused, I want to see proof," he says, his voice steady but firm. The tension grows thicker as the officer hesitates. Is this just a misunderstanding, or is there more to his actions than he's willing to admit? The officer's radio crackles, breaking the silence, but he ignores it, his face tight with frustration. Malik glances at his father, silently drawing strength from his calm yet commanding presence. Mr. Carter, refusing to back down, asks again, "What law has my son broken? Show me the evidence." His voice carries a quiet power that draws the attention of everyone around. The crowd, now larger, starts to shift in mood. More voices join in, questioning the officer's actions. The older woman repeats her statement louder. "This is wrong. The boy did nothing." Her courage inspires others to speak up, their voices growing stronger with each passing second. The officer's composure begins to crack. His hand hovers near his belt, as if considering his next move. Mr. Carter steps closer, his tone unwavering. "If you can't justify this, you're the one breaking the law." The tension is at its peak. Will this confrontation spiral out of control, or will justice finally shine through? Just as the officer seems ready to respond, another car pulls up, its flashing lights cutting through the tension. A senior officer steps out, surveying the scene with a sharp, authoritative gaze. The crowd quiets down, watching closely. The first officer stiffens, clearly uneasy as his superior approaches. "What's going on here?" the senior officer asks, his tone firm. Before the junior officer can answer, Mr. Carter speaks up, explaining everything calmly but firmly, emphasizing the lack of evidence and the unjust treatment of his son. The senior officer listens intently, his expression unreadable. Then, unexpectedly, another voice cuts through the air. It's a young man from the crowd holding up his phone. "I recorded everything," he announces. The officer's face pales as the man begins playing the video. The footage clearly shows Malik standing quietly before the confrontation began. Gasps ripple through the crowd, and the senior officer's eyes narrow. The truth is now undeniable, but what happens next could change everything. The senior officer watches the video intently, his jaw tightening with every passing second. When it ends, he turns to the junior officer, his tone sharp and unforgiving. "Is this how you represent this department?" The junior officer stammers, trying to defend his actions, but the crowd isn't having it. Their murmurs grow louder, a mix of anger and vindication. Mr. Carter, standing tall, addresses the senior officer directly. "My son deserves an apology, and this officer needs to be held accountable. This behavior cannot be ignored." His voice carries the weight of every injustice he's ever seen, and the crowd nods in agreement. Just as the senior officer begins to respond, the young man with the phone steps forward again. "There's more," he says, playing another clip. This time, it reveals the junior officer making a prejudiced comment before approaching Malik. The crowd erupts, and the senior officer's face darkens. Turning to the officer, he declares, "You're suspended immediately, pending investigation." The crowd cheers, but Mr. Carter isn't done. He places a reassuring hand on Malik's shoulder and says, loud enough for everyone to hear, "This isn't just about my son. It's about ensuring this never happens again." As the scene settles, the senior officer apologizes to Malik and promises change. But in the back of his mind, Mr. Carter knows this is only the beginning of a much larger fight for justice. As the crowd began to disperse, Malik and his father stood together, their bonds stronger than ever. The young man with the phone approached them, offering a handshake. "I just wanted to help," he said, his voice steady. Mr. Carter nodded, grateful for the support from a stranger who had made a big difference. Malik, still shaken but feeling a newfound strength, looked up at his father. "Thank you," he said softly. Mr. Carter smiled, his hand firm on Malik's shoulder. "Always stand tall, son. Never let anyone take your dignity." The senior officer assured them that a full investigation would follow and promised changes within the department. While it wasn't a complete fix, it was a step forward. As they walked away, Malik couldn't help but feel proud, not just of his father, but of the community that had stood with them. Justice had been served, but the fight for equality continued.